Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into Machine Minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds, the show where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and AI. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, a robotics and AI-focused search firm. And on today's show, we are lucky to have a very special guest, Daniel Theobald. Thank you for joining us, Daniel.
Hey, it's great to be here, Greg.
I really appreciate you making some time. I know you're super busy, and I'm excited to dive into your career, your entrepreneurial journey, and get your insights into the industry. It's going to be great. So let's jump into it.
All right.
Yeah. So let's start. Obviously, I didn't give any intro on your titles because you're involved in a number of things here. So can you share a bit with the listeners about your background, what you're doing right now, and how you actually got into the robotics and AI field?
Yeah, Greg, I was very fortunate to have grown up in what is now known as Silicon Valley. At the time, sort of pre-Silicon Valley. And I was exposed to technology, robotics, AI, computers, electronics from a very young age. I actually didn't realize this at the time, but was fortunate enough to attend one of the first elementary schools in the entire world that had a computer lab. Yeah, we had Apple I and Commodore PET computers. And, elementary school, middle school, I started learning to program. High school, I was fortunate enough to be chosen to represent the entire state of California at a computer science program at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab, where I got to use the world's fastest computer at that point, a Cray computer called Bubbles. It was called Bubbles because the entire computer, to keep it cool enough to run at those high speeds, was submerged in water.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And you don't see stuff like that these days so much. And I worked on artificial intelligence programs there, and I'm air quoting artificial intelligence because I actually find that word a little problematic. But got to do some AI on the world's fastest computer. Also got to meet iconic figure Eduard Teller, aka the father of the hydrogen bomb, which meeting him and conversing with him had a big impact on my career. And ended up going to MIT. I'd been building robots and computers, since I was a wee lad, and so MIT was just a really exciting opportunity, and was able to kind of put together my own degree program there. There's focus on sort of the electrical and computer science, or mechanical, or aeroastro, but I was able to kind of put together a robotics program for myself, and had a really great time, met some really amazing people. And then since then, I've just founded a number of companies, and have been having a great time watching. The world's going through a huge technology revolution, and I feel very fortunate that that's basically happening coincident with my lifetime, and couldn't be a more exciting time to be around.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think you're front and center, and the work you've been doing is really impactful for the whole robotics space in general. So I'd love to touch on that and share more about that with the listeners as well. You're obviously a serial entrepreneur, as you touched on there. You're co-founder of MassRobotics as well, which has a huge amount of involvement in the space in that hub that is the Boston, Massachusetts area for robotics as well.
MassRobotics is doing some really exciting stuff right now. I'm so proud of the impact that organization is having, and that the ever growing team there is just making such a big impact in the world.
So great. It's great. So right now you're president, obviously co-founder, president of MassRobotics, founder and chairman of Vecna Robotics. I'd love you to touch on that for people who aren't aware. And then you're working on some really interesting stuff right now with Twisted Fields. So can you give us some more insight into those?
Yeah. So Vecna Robotics is the world leader in autonomous forklift technology. Think of it as warehouse and factory equipment to move pallets and other large items. Some people call it bulk handling. Most people, may not fully appreciate that the world runs on pallets. Everything you see as you look around your environment was probably on a pallet at some point. So basically the entire physical economy moves on pallets, and it's one of the it's one of those jobs that is actually not well suited for humans to be on a forklift all day long moving pallets around. Can be very dangerous. A lot of accidents happen because people are not paying attention. They come to work
distracted.
You're tired, you're whatever, you're thinking about the game. A lot of accidents happen and a lot of people get hurt. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos. It's kind of crazy, but there's if you just search for it, there's all these videos of like a forklift operator running into racking, just the tall racks.
I have actually seen that. Yeah.
And the entire warehouse, like dominoes, everything comes down. Now, they're doing a better job of building the racking so that it doesn't domino like that. The fact of the matter is this is one of those cases where automation can really help prevent accidents and produce better throughput, can produce better results in terms of just working 24/7, not needing breaks, not getting tired, not losing focus. And that can allow the human workers to focus on what I would call the exceptions. Robots are never going to be perfect. They're never going to do everything. What we need is that great combination of robots and humans working together to basically empower or supercharge human productivity. And that's the thing that we've always focused on at Vecna Robotics is give humans the ability to do more than ever before. And we need that, really to meet the unreasonable consumer demands that our modern world has created. There's really no other way to do it. But the great thing is by using technology, we can start to meet those consumer demands in a more efficient way and basically, tread more lightly on Mother Earth. So that's a little bit about Vecna Robotics. And the work that we're doing at Twisted Fields is something that's very exciting for me because one of the areas that has lagged in technology adoption really is agriculture. And that's because perhaps we kind of focused on agriculture technology last century. We went from a situation where it took 73% of the population to produce the food we eat. I think the latest number is we're now down to less than 2%.
Wow.
And, again, a lot of times there's this argument of, technology taking jobs or automation taking jobs. Again, this is a great example where I don't think anybody is saying, oh, no, we should still have 73% of the population out working in the fields. Right. Probably not many people would go for that. And it's amazing because, this was the invention of the diesel tractor, basically. It allows a single farmer to do the work that, it used to take hundreds of people to do. But with every pro, there's a con, right? There's a downside to this. And the tractor allowed us to automate or efficiently farm what are called commodity crops: wheat, corn, soybean, these things that are sort of the staples or the basis for a lot of the modern food we eat. Unfortunately, it turns out they're not very healthy for you.
Surprise.
Surprise, surprise. So we've figured out how to grow a ton of unhealthy food very cost effectively, which is, okay, because now that's freed us up in a sense to pursue other things like, exploring space and science and health and education and art and music. these are pursuits that many, many more people are able to be involved in because we're not out in the field. But the time has come to start to address some of the downsides of that approach. What we really should be eating are leafy greens and vegetables and broccoli and squash and fruit. And these are things that unfortunately, sort of a big tractor with a grain combine on it can't really deal with. So these foods are still, primarily harvested, weeded using human labor. And the upshot of that is it makes it really expensive. So people who don't have a lot of resources end up eating junk. They go down to the local corner store. Yeah, you get your cheese puffs and your Coca-Cola and you're all set. And then surprise, you end up with all kinds of health issues. So one of our goals is to try and now bring the advantages of robotics, AI, modern automation to these more complex farming tasks like, growing leafy greens, weeding fields, harvesting fruits and vegetables, and doing that in a way that is cost effective. And this is really the key. I see a lot of times robotics companies start up and they'll go out and they'll build this incredibly complicated, very expensive, very space age, device that's so expensive. At the end of the day, it ends up not being practical. Now, that's great from a research point of view. It's great from a expand our knowledge of how to build robots point of view. But from an impact on our economic systems of agriculture, it doesn't really have much bearing on where we're going.
Right.
So what we decided to do was to take a lot of the technology that we've developed over the years, a lot of the patents we have, and sort of push it into this idea of building an ultra low cost farming robotic platform that anybody worldwide could download the plans for free. It's all open source, and build themselves. Companies could then build these things and sell them and make a viable business. The industry, the community as a whole can build new implements, new apps for it. What we really wanted to do is sort of sort of like the 3D printer, open source 3D printer, how that's changed the world. 3D printers used to cost, $500,000 to get a decent 3D printer. And because of once those patents ran out, a whole wave of open source 3D printers came into the market. And you can now get a 3D printer that's, pretty much almost as good as that $500,000 one for about $100.
Yeah.
So this is what we're trying to do for farming. We're trying to so drastically reduce the cost of automation that it can really start to make healthy food economically feasible for everyone on the planet.
Talk about a global impact. I love hearing that. Yeah. I mean, food as medicine is a theme that I've heard a lot more. And I used to lead talent acquisition at Sweetgreen, which is a fast casual salad chain. And that was a big thing for them. It's like farm to table. They work directly with the farmers. It's like good organic food. But the bigger problem was the health issues that everyone's facing because they don't have access to this type of food, or they're not even aware.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
But still, even in Sweetgreen's case, they've obviously got a lot of flack for it because they're still expensive. It's like $15, $20 for a really good salad that's going to fill you up. But that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So how do you bring that cost down? And this is amazing. Love to hear that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the interesting thing about it is that we don't really realize how powerful good food is in affecting our health. Mm-hmm. Early on, I had a roommate that always used to say, "I'd rather pay the grocer than the doctor," and I laughed at that. At the time, I like, yeah, whatever, you're crazy. But it's really true. And I'll just give you one anecdote. And I'm certainly not one to make health claims, unfounded health claims. But I will tell you that during COVID, I was able to come here to the research farm, and I just stayed at the research farm for the entire COVID. Never went to the grocery store once. Wow. Just ate all the organic, pesticide-free food off the land. Nobody here got sick even once.
Really?
No one got sick even once. And there are people who came and visited who had COVID, and people went out in the community, but nobody here ever had any symptoms. And we just don't get sick here. And I believe that that's due in part to the great food that we're eating. Yeah. And also, we're out working, we're getting exercise, and you put exercise and good, healthy food, good, healthy, clean food together, and you're probably not going to have a lot of health problems.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, most of the health problems start with your diet, and you've even seen where people are reversing chronic illnesses or pains or cancer in some cases with diet shifts. Pure raw vegan diets at the extreme, right? And then there's the whole craze of water fasting and stuff like that. But we'll leave that for another episode. You've obviously learned a lot in your entrepreneurial journey. There's been key milestones and lessons and things like that. For any of the aspiring entrepreneurs, is there anything that you can share there of stuff that you've learned with these different organizations, different products, different industries that you worked in?
Boy, the list is long. I think that the first thing is that I'd say is ask for help. This is the reason we started MassRobotics in the first place, was to help entrepreneurs get the help they need to be successful at higher rates. Entrepreneurship is really hard. Entrepreneurship in robotics is probably one of the hardest. Building robots is amazing, but there are so many things that can go wrong. I like to tell people that robotics is like the pinnacle of engineering in a sense, right? It combines electrical, mechanical, software, sensors, all of these things, and you have to, build software that's smarter than any software ever before. A program that runs on your computer, great. If it has a bug, if it has a glitch, who really cares, right? When you're writing software that's operating particularly heavy machinery in the real world, it's a whole new level. It's like 1,000 times more difficult to get it right. So robotics is hard. Robotics business is hard. So we really wanted to, help offset some of that by providing this resource in MassRobotics. And MassRobotics actually is just starting an accelerator program. Unfortunately, now the deadline has passed to apply, but they're actually giving $100,000 of non-dilutive funding to 10 companies in this first cohort of companies, where they're going to go in and they're going to get mentored and access to investors and companies and all of these type of things. So asking for help. I remember early on in my career, there was a lot of ego, a lot of pride, and it's kind of like, oh, I can do this by myself. I know what I'm doing, and you figure it out, but a lot of times you suffer unnecessarily. And getting good mentors, asking for help. And I'm always available, by the way. It does surprise me sometimes that we don't reach out more in this connected world, right? You can send an email or a text message or LinkedIn message to just about anyone, yet we don't really take advantage of that as much as we could. So I always encourage people to, if I can be helpful, reach out to me. I'm gonna always do what I can to help people who ask for help. So that's I think the most important one. Beyond that, there's a lot of very specific or general, but specific instances for me of lessons that I've learned the hard way. And I'll just share a couple of those. One is really important to trust your gut. I can't tell you the number of times when I let somebody else talk me out of doing what my gut was telling me to do, and almost universally I regretted it later on.
Is that like with a product direction or just a decision? Or
everything?
Really?
Product, business, pricing, I mean, you name it. Personnel decisions. The brain is an amazing organ. It is absolutely amazing. And so much of it is subconscious. So when we talk about the gut, a lot of times that's a way of saying the rest of my brain is trying to tell my conscious brain something, and so often we don't listen. because it's sort of amassed these experiences and it's building these great models. So ignoring your gut is often fraught with peril. So listen to your gut. It doesn't mean blindly like do something stupid, because emotionally that's not what I'm talking about. Like emotionally you'd rather do that other thing. But you got to listen to your gut. Do not defer to lessons. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but don't defer to people who are not in the driver's seat. As an entrepreneur, you need to be in the driver's seat, and you need to ask for advice. You need to listen to advice. You need to hear everybody. But at the end of the day, you are the one who has to make the decision, and you're the one who's going to have to live with the decision more than anyone else. So do not defer those decisions to other people. The other one is to remember that it's all about people. At the end of the day, everything we do is about people. And sometimes it's easy for business to forget that. People start thinking it's about money. And yes, you have to make money to be successful. If you're not making money, you're not going to be in business very long. But when money becomes the ultimate priority over people, you oftentimes end up sacrificing the long-term financial success of the organization without realizing it. And this is where I think a lot of people that maybe struggle with lower EQ sometimes make short-term decisions that seem financially wise, but in the end, they cut themselves off at the knees because they forget that people are the most important and the most valuable asset in any enterprise. So that's really important. And part of that means that you have to remember that sometimes it's not a good fit. One of the hardest things for me as an early entrepreneur was firing somebody. I remember the first time I agonized over it for like a month. I'm like, oh, I'll mentor them, I'll help them, I'll, do whatever. And it just wasn't a good fit. And I wasn't helping them by keeping them in a position that wasn't a good fit for them. Right?
It's a tough realization.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about helping the person be successful elsewhere. Right? It's never about, oh, they're terrible or they're a bad person and I just gotta, fire them and get them out of here. That doesn't work really well. When you do things with kindness, you genuinely care about the person. You also genuinely care about the business. And so you realize that keeping them in that position is likely doing more harm to more people, right? All the coworkers that have to deal with it, or the business as a whole, and the investors that aren't going to be as successful. So you kindly help them be successful elsewhere.
And then
those
for
are just
them
a couple
as well.
of quick thoughts.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you. And they lead me on to two other things I want to talk about. But just to go down that road a little bit, it's also for that individual, because if they're not best suited for it, and they could be best suited even somewhere else in the company or externally, and you can make that introduction or referral, they're not going to be satisfied, they're not going to be performing well, they're not going to be engaged in work, and it's just basically a ticking time bomb. In the process is making that bad ripple effect, like you said, everyone else around. Yeah,
exactly. And Greg, I think you really hit the nail on the head. In the US in particular, it seems like we have a very bad relationship with our jobs by and large, right? We hate our jobs, we hate our bosses, we don't want to go to work. And that's a really sad way to spend the majority of your waking hours, my thought.
Yeah, that's true.
And people just think, oh, well, that's the way it is. You go to work, you hate your boss, you hate your job, and eventually you quit and you go try something else, which then you hate that boss and you hate that job too. There's no need for it. It used to be that we didn't have a choice, right? And admittedly, some people still struggle with very few choices and just have to put up with a bad situation. And my heart goes out to them. However, for many of us now, I'd argue the majority, right? Since 73% of us don't have to be in the field picking vegetables anymore, that we have more choice than ever before to choose a career or to choose a way to put food on the table. And we should prioritize our happiness in that process more.
Yeah.
Because that is not only going to allow us to have a happier life, but the work that we do is going to be more impactful. It's going to have a bigger impact on the future of humanity because you're going to be doing something you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever made a difference in the world on something they weren't passionate about, right? If you're just showing up and punching the clock, why even bother?
It's true. You're going to operate at a much higher level if you're engaged, if you're happy. If you're happy in your day-to-day with work, wherever it is, you're always going to be happier in the long run. You're going to work longer, produce better work. And then also for your company, you're not going to be leaving every 12, 24 months and trying to find something new. It's crazy. Starting the same cycle again.
Yeah.
That's the norm now.
It's the norm. It's so counterproductive. It's like about 1 year, in my experience, is when somebody truly starts having the potential to become productive.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just move on to the next thing. It's like you never actually get to that state of flow, right? You never get to that state of competence where it's really just so satisfying to be there and doing amazing work. It's
People
like we're always looking, but we're never finding. And
they get that 1 year itch, and then they're like, "Oh, let me just have conversations and see what's out there." But
well, Greg, I think this is my theory. I think a big part of that is that we don't know how to maintain good relationships with our coworkers.
100%.
And so what happens is after about a year, you've now had enough negative interactions with people that it becomes, uncomfortable enough that you're like, I'm going to go elsewhere, right? I've got this unresolved issue with this coworker. I've got this unresolved issue with my boss. And I always tell people that a negative interaction is like picking up a stone and putting it in your backpack, right?
And
now you're carrying that weight around you with you all the time. And you just keep adding more and more. If you don't stop and deal with those negative interactions, right? We should pull people aside and say, hey, when you said X to me the other day, it kind of made me feel uncomfortable and I want to talk about it. I respect you. I want you to be happy in your work. I want to be happy in my work. So, we should have a conversation about this. And why is that conversation so hard for us to have?
Honestly, from my experience, a lot of this, there's two things. One, it's top-down approach, right? You are obviously a very self-aware person, founder and leader, and you lead with integrity and also trying to do the right thing. It just comes across as that way, like all the time, whether it's for your team, the environment, the world, that's what you lead with. And then there's the other side of it, like you mentioned, people that are just about the money or the financial element. Business is business. There's no hard feelings, whatever, and it's very cutthroat, cold.
No hard feelings,
right? But it's feelings. It's about people. So if you treat people like a commodity, it's going to feed into every area, right? So if you're just going to fire people for no reason or not think about people's development and all of that stuff, that just bleeds into your organization. But then also that becomes your culture, and that's a huge thing now, right? If you don't lead with professional development and open communication and integrity and also camaraderie, it makes it much easier for people to leave or hold on to the negative interaction, because they're always going to have it, right? Whether it's
it's always there.
Whether it's constructive criticism or feedback or something or a bad day, it's going to happen. And I find now it's even more difficult to deal with and create a culture or even have these communications in this world of remote working. We don't have to deal with it as much in the hardware world, right? You want people in-house, it's contact sport, etc. But so many more people are just remote and out in their own island and isolated, and their culture is their Slack channel or their Zoom meetings. So what do you think about that? How can people overcome that?
Yeah, I certainly acknowledge that our social structure, particularly at work, has undergone a vast shift in the past decade. I think the fundamentals ultimately, though, are still the same. I mean, you and I are having this conversation and we're connecting, and it'd be great if we were in the same room, but we're not. I have no idea where you are.
Yeah.
That's okay. But I think it really comes down more to this idea of caring about people, not looking at people as resources. This was something that struck me early on. I hated the term human resources. I never had a human resources department or officer because humans aren't resources, right? Resources are things like water and electricity and land and, coal, and these things are resources. You think of resources as something you use up.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be using up people. People are the point. People are our greatest asset when it comes to building a great company and building a great team. So it's maybe just this attitude, and you said it before. The leader really sets the tone for the entire organization. So whether we're meeting over Zoom or in person, I don't think that's as important as the level of respect and camaraderie that the team has with each other, and I think that can be built, in a distributed global fashion, or everybody in the same room. But it really comes down to this idea of we're working as a team because we want our coworkers to be successful. I always encourage people on my team to say, what can I do today to make work better for my coworkers? Right? And if you think about that, when you do that, let's say it's a company of 100 people, all of your coworkers are thinking about what can I do to make life better for my coworkers, then you've got 99 people looking out for you. On the other hand, if the attitude is, I have to take care of myself, I'm not going to agree to do any work that I don't want to do. I'm not going to stretch myself. I'm not going to, and we see a lot of this right now. I don't know. It just seems to be more of the culture, which is, standing up for yourself is great and it's important and it's valuable, but these things have to be kept in balance. And so we were able to create a culture at Vecna Technologies, one of the early companies that I started, where everybody talked about just how amazing it was to work there and how great the people were. And because of that, we were able to pull off things that I don't think any other company could have gotten done. I mean, we were pioneers in the robotics industry. We built robots that were out there in the real world doing very, very difficult things, probably a decade before anybody else was able to do it. And it's because we had a team that was passionate about technology, but more importantly, they cared about each other. It's like that esprit de corps. You're in the trenches. One of the ways we actually built that, Greg, was we had a benefit of paying our employees to spend 10% of every work week doing community service.
Wow, every work week?
Every work week, 4 hours out of every work week, you had the option of going and doing some community service of your choosing. And, one of my, I had a lot of mentors, out of MIT Business School, Sloan School, and Harvard Business School. One of them was Clayton Christensen. Clayton Christensen is, sort of business renown, innovator's dilemma. He was the person who coined the term disruptive technology. But, him and others would say, well, can't really do that community service thing. You're potentially giving up huge amounts of profit for the company. You can't run a company that way. And this was one area where I followed my gut. I didn't listen to that. And I said, but this seems like the right thing to do. And an amazing thing happened. We actually ended up performing far better because we were giving this benefit where people could go and do community service 4 hours out of every work week. And the big surprise was we weren't losing any productivity. As a matter of fact, we were gaining productivity because the people who thought of themselves as the type of people who would do community service, they were out there doing it anyway, but they're also the type of people who want to do great work for their coworkers.
Right.
So they'd put in the extra hours at work. And it just created this esprit de corps that I think was incredibly rare. And the other thing was it acted as this incredible self-filtering mechanism.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, people who were, because one of the things I'd talk about, and at this point I interviewed every single person before hiring them, one of the things I talked about, I said, hey, what do you do for community service right now? Do you think about what you might do if you join Vecna? And people who were not interested in community service, for people who would turn up their nose at giving back in community service, they weren't the kind of people who, enjoyed the idea of working for a company like Vecna. So they would go elsewhere. And again, what you find is the people who actively choose to participate in community service, they're healthier, they're happier, they live longer, they're more fun to be around, they're more productive, they're better teammates. Hence, big surprise, we had this incredibly, incredibly productive, fun team that could take on any challenge and knock it out of the park.
That's so great. And you had really good retention as well. I say still have, from your employees.
Yeah, early on, there's a core group of people there that been with me for decades plus now, and it's
so
just
rare.
those relationships are just so strong because once you feel what work can be, you never want to go back. And some of them have actually moved on to some other jobs, and they're calling me all the time and saying, I've just got to hang on here a while longer. Yeah, and we're all talking about the next big thing we're going to do together.
Amazing. Okay, look, two more topics I want to touch on just before we wrap up, because I'm conscious of the time, and you're just sharing so much great stuff, so I love it. Thank you. I've heard you talk a couple of times and share with the startup community and founders about your perspective and insights on funding and investments, instead of like the different options that are out there, what to be mindful of, things like that, whether it's been from your own experiences or just what you're aware of in the industry. Can you share some more about that?
Yeah, it's a really important topic, Greg, and I can't tell you the number of startups I've found that have been great team, great product idea, great market opportunity, but they've killed themselves by making poor decisions around funding. I actually grew my first startups, bootstrapped it for over a decade. Bootstrapping meaning I never took any outside money. And, that was one of the best decisions I ever made. It's harder in some sense, but it creates a focus that you're not going to get in other ways. Believe it or not, you can go out and get someone to give you money, an investor to, excuse me. You can probably find an investor to give you money for just about anything. That doesn't mean it's a good business idea. And the problem with taking outside money is it's like pressing the self-destruct button on your spaceship. This is an Aliens reference, or Alien. You basically have 1 hour to find the alien, kill the alien, disable the self-destruct, or your enterprise is getting blown to pieces. And that's because when you take outside money, you, in a sense, create a false or an artificial time horizon or time limit on your business. Clayton Christensen, again, to refer back to him, he said, Daniel, after I wrote that book and, was really known in the industry, I decided to start a business. And because I was a famous Harvard Business School professor, I had money falling off the table. Like, investors were trying to give me money left and right. And he says, that was the worst possible thing for our business. And you say, well, why? Having resources like that should be great. But what it does is it creates an artificial economy where you are not actually tuned in to the real economic equation, which is I have to provide more value to my customers so that they will be willing to pay me enough money. And if what they're paying me isn't getting a return on investment for them, it doesn't matter how cool it is. It doesn't matter how many books I've written. At the end of the day, the business isn't going to last. It's not going to be viable. So through this process of bootstrapping and like building a business that had to spend less than it made, right, which is great advice for everybody, always spend a little bit less than you make. Spend a lot less than you make if you can afford to. But the difference between spending a little bit less than you make and spending a little bit more than you make is one has an infinite time horizon, the other has a very finite time horizon. And there's some really interesting businesses out there that basically have taken this to heart and sort of designed their home business around this idea that we're always going to have enough money in the bank and we're always going to limit our spending to a rate that is something less than we're making. Again, I'm emphasizing this a lot, but that keeps you in power. That keeps you in control. That means that, no matter what happens, you've got options available to you. When you've built a big company that's dependent on venture capital or, some kind of other outside artificial money source, not only are you at risk, you're at risk because what happens if there's an economic downturn? What happens if you realize that the market that you were going for wasn't quite right and you need to make a big pivot? You might not get a second chance in that case. But the other big factor is that when you take money, you also give up control. You have to give up some amount of control every time you take money, and eventually you will find that you're not in control anymore. And sometimes that's okay, I guess. Sometimes that can work out. But oftentimes now you're back in the situation where other people end up making the most important decisions for your business. You're no longer able to follow your gut because you're not in the driver's seat anymore. Yeah. And, that can create a lot of problems. So there's all kinds of other ways to fund your business that aren't taking money from somebody.
Just to give a real world example, you still, in terms of ownership, you still have quite a large ownership stake in it's Vecna, right?
Yeah, Vecna Robotics, I own about a third of it still, which is uncommon at this stage. All my other businesses, I own 100% of them still.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
and so it can be done.
It can be done. It can be done.
Real.
Yeah, and the key is you just have to be a little bit more creative, right? Everybody thinks that, well, if you're a legitimate founder and if you're a good business, you can convince people to give you money. Well, if you're a really good founder, you don't need to convince people to give you money.
Yeah, you're already generating it.
You're generating it, and it's about you start small. And you build on it, and you build, and you build, and you build. You hear all these stories, like the Warren Buffetts of the world or whomever, they started out with, I don't know if this is true in this case, but, they started out with, working in the stock room.
Right. And they work their way up, and it's slow and steady at the end of the day.
Slow and steady. There's a lot to be said for slow and steady.
For sure. I think everyone's got, it's the generation out of the world now. There's a lot of instant gratification and like this chase to be, we saw it in, I guess, when the Facebooks and the Snapchats and all of that stuff, and it was just all about like scale and users and all of that stuff, and just burn the money. Obviously Amazon were doing the same thing, but just like taking over, and it's all about how many people you can get on platform and adopting your technology instead of the revenue or profit, right? And you just can't do that in the hardware world. It's a lot more expensive to do that. And then, like you said, we've gone through these economic downturns and stuff like that, and people just like get caught in the headlights. Like, oh crap, now what do we do? We just got to lay everyone off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny, Greg, because I think that we think of these examples like Facebook and Amazon and Google, etc. And we oftentimes don't realize that for every one of those, there's, about 100,000 businesses that weren't that successful, or a million, who knows, right? But I worked with this company very early on. This was during the .com craze. Many of your listeners were alive then and will remember the .com craze. But it was a company where it was all about having .com in your company name. And if you had .com in your company name, you were instantly worth 10 times as much. Easy to add .com. So almost everybody did at the time. But it was all about this hyper growth. And my friend, Jacob, he was the CEO of this company we were working on together. And he said, and the investors came into my office and they said, if you're not hiring, you're dying. Hire, 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 hire. And then 2 months later, he said, and then they were in my office saying, and if you're not firing, you're dying. Fire, 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 fire.
Oh, that's comical.
It is. And that is what happens right now in these,
Yeah.
oftentimes these venture-backed situations where it's just it's whiplash.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't good for our economy.
Yeah.
It's not the right way to do things. It's incredibly wasteful. It creates all kinds of trauma for people.
Mm-hmm.
It destroys a lot of people's wealth at the end of the day. There's some who become very wealthy, but it doesn't in general benefit the population as a whole.
Well,
Much,
also,
much better. Yeah,
yeah.
steady,
Sorry,
slow and
yeah,
steady.
slow and steady for sure. Like I was just thinking about, I'm always thinking about like the hiring landscape and the talent pool, and it also, a phrase I use a lot is pollutes the talent pool in the
Mm-hmm.
startup world as well, because after 2 startups, sometimes even 1, you just get burned and you're like, I don't want to be laid off for a reason that was not my doing, or because
Mm-hmm.
people weren't being forthcoming with financial information or like the actual state of the company or
Yeah,
whatever
that
it may
happens
be.
all the time.
Right. After I speak to people and they're like, you know what, I just can't at this point in my life or my situation, I can't go to another startup. It's too much risk. Whereas if you look at in terms of risk these days, it's normally the larger companies that are doing the bigger layoffs. Whereas if someone's
Absolutely
just
true.
recently, raised capital in the last 12 months, if they don't even have to be a serial entrepreneur. They can be a first-time founder, but they're mature. They understand career, hiring, growing a team, and they're fiscally responsible. You're a lot safer there because you have the runway. You already know what that is, or your line of sight to your next round of
Yeah,
funding.
100%.
Yeah.
I had this conversation all the time with young people when I was early on in my career, and they'd say, "Well, man, I'm really excited about joining your company, but my parents want me to join a bigger company because it's more stable or whatever."
Yeah.
And I had to explain to them. I said, "Actually, if you look statistically speaking, um, you know, you're more likely to get laid off from Microsoft than uh, from my company for sure." Um,
Right.
and you're a number there. You're literally a number.
Mm-hmm. They're
And
just going to shave it
yeah,
whenever
and
they need to.
in the at least in my companies, everybody was a vital part of the organization, and you felt it, and that was
Yeah.
motivating.
Love that. Yeah, it's rare. I mean, honestly, I want to say it's rare because you are, like I said, aware and you take all of that to heart and you want to make sure all the people you're hiring are for a reason, for a purpose, and they're part of that team. So they're embedded within that. Other people, yeah, it's a number or it's just scale because we've been told to scale or our
Hmm.
competitors are hiring, so we need to hire.
We need to hire people.
Yeah. Well, look, this is great. I want to wrap up on a last point. Like I said, I'm conscious of time. Just get your insights or your perspective on the future of the robotics industry right now, the current state, and what you're kind of excited about
Yeah.
that's coming.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on that's really exciting. I think that we have turned a corner finally. I've been working on robotics my entire career, and I think we've turned the corner finally where people are realizing that, or I should say first, the technology has gotten good enough, the compute has gotten fast enough, the sensors have gotten good enough that we can do a lot of things better than we could have done them before now with automation. Automation, well, I should say robotics, really used to be more of a curiosity. Now we're finding that there are many, many applications that it provides a big return on investment if you're smart about using robotics to empower people. I think there's a lot of hype around AI. I think it's a little bit distracting. I think there's a lot of fear around some of these
Mhm.
topics, and I think that that's counterproductive. Um, back in the early 19th or 20th century, we had AI, at least what we called AI. There were these mechanical machines that calculated the tides. They called them brass braids. I want to show you something real quick.
Yeah.
I just found this.
Wow.
Tractor dug it up on the farm. I don't know if you can see, but
No
it's
way.
it's a clockwork mechanism. It's made of brass. I don't
Yeah.
know when it's from. Maybe it was
Uh-huh.
just a clock, but maybe it was a calculator of some sort. This is what compute used to look like.
That's amazing.
And we could theoretically do all the same compute that we do with today's modern computers with these type of computers. They'd be huge, the size of cities, and expensive and very slow, but you could do all the same computations. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that these are just mechanical computations, and AI is a misnomer. There's no intelligence there. It's running an algorithm. It's important to not, I think, get too worried about things like, the AI coming alive and taking over. I think the challenge is, the thing we have to be aware of is that humans using technology, can do it for either good or evil. And that's the thing we need to think about, not worrying about, the technology somehow, coming against humanity. That's not going to happen. But these advanced models, these learning models, they're new and better ways of computing that allow us to accelerate our ability to take on new tasks at a rate that is unprecedented. More technology makes it so that we can create more technology even faster, right? So we're just at this, we're continuing on this exponential curve, and who knows if it'll flatten out at some point. One of the things I'm really excited about at the end of the day is this idea of optimization. Now that we've got technology that's inexpensive enough that we can, really deploy it just about everywhere, we start to be able to gather information about what's going on in a way that can allow us to start to optimize our resource utilization. We're automating things and we're using that to go faster. We're using it to do more, but we haven't really used it to optimize yet, anywhere close to the potential. And we're going to have to do that, again, because we have limited resources here on this planet. And you can't just continue to grow, at the rates that people want to see economies grow. We're running out of resources. So where we have to start to put our focus of AI, of robotics, etc., is resource usage optimization. How can we do more with less? How can we accomplish more in a way that doesn't, kill our planet? Efficiency. That's right. And there's a lot of tools now coming out that are really going to help with that. One of them that I'm really excited about is what some people call digital twins. This idea that you can model the world, a factory, a warehouse, a system, with enough fidelity that you can actually run A/B testing or what if scenarios in, it's kind of like the Matrix. You can kind of try stuff out there, and you can say, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we combined all these deliveries and sent them at the same time? What if we, you can
simulations, now they're becoming so useful in every industry, right? Yeah, especially this one.
Yeah. So, my advice to particularly large companies is investing in automation is good, but where you are going to have the biggest economic impact and the biggest environmental positive impact is by investing in great simulation tools and then starting to use that to really optimize your resource utilization. Because win-win, that also drives down costs.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about for the future. We can use all of this technology to do more with less. And I think that needs to be the focus.
That's great. And like you were talking about with farming and everything, driving the costs down, making it more affordable for everyone else, and then freeing up our time to do other things and create new technology. So it's a
go out and
sunny
live
horizon.
Life.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, look, Daniel, thank you so much for this. This has been an amazing episode. I'm really excited to see this open source farming robot that you've been working on at Twisted Fields. And I love the common theme. The theme that you've always worked on about technology empowering humans and allowing us to do more, and seeing how that's been prevalent in all the things that you've been working in. It's really great to hear. And your perspective as a leader and founder, I think a lot of the listeners are going to get some real value from this episode. So thank you. Where can everyone find you, follow you, keep an eye out on what you've been doing or what's to come?
Yeah, 100%. Follow me on LinkedIn, send me messages, and I'm happy to connect with people. I mentor a significant number of founders, and generally we'll have a conversation, and then I'll end up giving them my cell phone number, and they'll just call me throughout the week and say, "Hey, what do you think about X, Y, and Z?" And the first advice I always give everybody is don't take anyone's advice, including mine. Listen, incorporate it into your thinking, but ultimately you have to make the decisions.
Love that. That's a great thing to end on. Thanks, Daniel. Until next
Thank
time.
you. Great to be here.